Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Your speaker is Andrew Irumba Katusabe. We are dealing with the illegal mining of African minerals or mineral resources by colonial powers under the guise of development partners. They call themselves development partners, but the question tonight we want to ask ourselves is how far or how long should we keep quiet as Africa?
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
The people in Nigeria, welcome to this discussion. I'm glad that you're able to make it for this evening's discussion. And everybody else who's watching online or listening, following online, you're welcome to this discussion. Now, the topic is about mining in Africa. Mining in Africa and the challenges we face as a continent. I'll first start by saying mining started more than 400 years ago. So this is when European countries realized that there was minerals and plenty of them in Africa. Of course, they had found and explored minerals from other places like Asia, India, China, and also in South America. But today we are focusing on Africa. So when they discovered that there's a lot of minerals and in Africa, most European countries, starting with the Dutch, set up companies to come and do the exploration, but they also gave these companies a lot of power. They allowed them to trade in slaves. They allowed them to colonize countries where they saw there was like some potential. They allowed them to do business. These countries, and specifically the top 5, I'm talking about the Dutch, the Germans, the British, the Belgians, Italians, Spanish, Portuguese. All these countries gained some interest in the continent because they had seen potential. Now, what do? By the time somebody sends a company, what does a company do? A company is supposed to make profits. Yes. And that's exactly what they did. So let's take an example of the Imperial British East African Company. After the French Revolution, there was a lot of interest in Africa, in European countries to come to Africa. Some people, like the British, came late to the game. But the Dutch, the French, the Belgians were already occupying huge chunks of land in Africa. Now, when the British realized they were late for the game, they put up a company and they sent the Imperial British East African Company. I'm going to talk about East Africa because I know West Africa is represented. But let's talk about the Imperial British East African Company and also the German East African Company. So when they realized there was minerals in Africa, they decided to settle. And what some of the challenges that we face now that stop us as Africans from controlling our own minds is because of the contracts that were signed back then. And you know, because there was no exploration, Africans didn't know what the worth was of their minerals. So these people come in and they realize, for instance, we can be able to get salt, even something as simple as salt. We can be able to get gold. We can be able to get uranium. So what do? Let's take an example of South Africa. A company comes, like this, the Dutch company, comes and discovers there is coal, there is gold, there is diamond. What do? They have agreements with the local people and sign a contract for mining for 150 years. Even the owners of that company will not live to see the end of this contract. but their descendants will. So those are the kind of contracts that have bound Africa in a marriage of some countries that stay in your country exploiting your minerals, but there's a contract. They have a contract to do this. So that was the first way that Europe got access to countries in Africa. They signed long contracts and they stayed, they keep exploiting, they keep mining, and all these things are sent to Europe. Now, another challenge that we have, the reason we are not doing our own mining, as it was the case in all the companies that came, they only developed infrastructure that could take the resources from the place of exploitation of the mining up to the ports and onto their countries. So I think what I should what I should do right now is probably just take you through the challenges that the mining industry has in Africa. The first challenge is we do not have a way of quantifying what we have. We don't
know the value of what we have.
We do not know the value. We do not know how much.
They are the ones telling us your value is this one.
Yes. So that exposes African countries to a situation where they allow somebody to just come and guess and say, okay, let us explore some oil in Hoima. Let us explore some oil in Wari. Let's say in Port Harcourt. Let us give it a shot. When they find it, who do you think is going to have the contract? The upper hand in the contract. Is the person who already knows how much oil they can be able to get from there. Another case is Niger, and it's all over Africa. They have uranium, and a report comes out that says Niger can be able to supply 5% of the world's uranium. But is there anybody in Niger that knew that before? No. It's the French people. The same thing with oil. Total, Shell, and BP. They come and do the exploration themselves. Another challenge is, one of the things that stop us from mining is energy. Energy. Can you imagine a continent that still has natural resources not being able to produce enough energy to process and mine the precious items that are coming from the ground in Africa? I believe that is very, very intentional. If you look at a case of Niger, let me go back to Niger. There is Niger and Nigeria. There is a pipeline coming off the coast of Nigeria in Wari, passes through the Sahel region, the Maghreb region, and goes to Europe. What is it taking? Energy. And here we are in Africa. We are saying we do not have enough power to be able...
Yet you're exporting.
And we're exporting it. And the people who are coming to mine in our countries, for some reason, they have that power. So where is it that we're lacking? Another thing is skills. We do not have enough skills. That's one of the reasons.
To mine our own resources.
Enough skills to be able, like I believe at Makerere, there are people who are geologists and they can be able to do such things.
And why are they not doing it?
It's very intentional. That's what I'm saying. Somebody will say, I don't trust you, or it's expensive to try and determine. We are coming with our own explorers. We are coming with our own geologists who can determine how this thing is going to be done. And remember, we are still acting on contracts that were signed 200, 150 years ago. You cannot change it. So they block all the places where the governments of Africa can be able to benefit. Now, it is only until recently, I'm saying maybe 20 years ago, or even 15, when the government started saying, we need to take part in these profits that you're getting from our mines. In Uganda, I know for sure, we still don't know how much minerals we have. We do not have that data. A good example of an African country that has tried to educate their people in oil and gas. Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria also. They are very big. Like, you realize most oil companies from Europe and Asia, like Sinopec, Total, they employ Nigerians. So Nigerians are a little bit ahead of us when it comes to oil and gas.
That's why on this topic, they are the ones who are actually big on this platform discussing.
But we should also follow suit. We should also follow suit. Another challenge that is facing African countries. When these people come, when the Europeans come, or Chinese, or whatever foreigners, any company from anywhere, when they come to Uganda or to any African country, they are usually the ones calling the shots on the taxes. Yet, like I said before, the fiscal benefits of minerals for government is in taxes, royalties, advantage in improving the skills. But here we are, somebody also said, you're saying we are going to collect tax. Then they say, what's the tax regime at this moment? For instance, if VAT or an import tax or withholding tax, let's say a withholding tax is 6%. VAT is 18%. They will lock in that tax regime, even if whatever changes 15 years later, the GDP has changed. A lot of things are happening around. They have locked their tax regime. They've locked their taxes. You can't change them. Another thing, importation taxes, they get exemptions. They get exemptions for them to import the machinery that they are using. Another thing is, they do not allow, they are taking away like semi-raw products. Why can't we add value
to our own resources?
What is the problem with Africans not wanting to add value to their own products? But you see, this is a created problem. We know why.
Why?
A local manufacturer will not have the same benefits that an investor comes in. They are sometimes even given tax breaks. But you, as a local manufacturer, you want to add value. Your products will be more expensive than the one the investor is working with. Because he has tax breaks. So if we cannot look through a small lens and start focusing on manufacturing and adding value to our own minerals here, we are going to be exploited. And by the time you know it, and like I said, these things are not renewable. When they are gone, they are gone. You'll be left with a crevice somewhere or a quarry. You cannot even do agriculture on it. And they will go. And they will even take the equipment. Another issue is infrastructure. The colonial powers intentionally put infrastructure connecting them to resource-rich places, to the port and out of the country. That's why you find up to now, oil coming in from wherever is being still transported
by road,
by vehicles,
yes,
by road,
trucks,
by trucks. But if you look at the regions where salt was coming from, gold, copper,
there's a railway line.
There's a railway line.
Yeah.
And we do not improve on that. We're not improving on that. The same ones the British have put are the ones you're still using. And you can tell how selfish they were. The same thing with power. Electricity was only available to the white neighborhoods. So you can see all our problems are being created because we do not.
But right now, Uma, right now, is it really not our mistake, our weakness, to see that the Europeans left Uganda 62 years ago, and up to now we are still shipping oil from Mombasa by road? Have they stopped us from using Lake Victoria here?
The problem is they have not left. They are still here. There is neo-colonialism. They are still here. So this fact of saying we were colonized and we got independence in 1962, there is still neo-colonialism. African leaders are being used as puppets by European powers, and they still have their claws deep into our resources. So we cannot say, oh, since they left, you cannot do anything. It's very intentional. So my brothers and sisters, we should come up and rise and say, enough is enough. Let us write our own books. Let us write our own story and turn this thing around and agree to be part of a movement that says we can be able to do it ourselves. Let us influence our educational institutes. Let us skill our people. Let us teach our children how to be able to be manufacturers. Now, you see, lately, you find somebody walking around with plastic cups, plastic plates, somebody walking the entire day. This is somebody who's probably an S4 graduate. They have finished S4, they were not able to get money, or even sometimes S6. What are they doing? They are going around. They did not make it to the university, or because of finances, they were not able to make it to a tertiary institute. But look at China. 20 years ago, the story of China was different. Then America noticed that we can actually start making our things in China. Why? Because China built a base of manufacturing from a very early stage. You find 6-year-olds being taught how to do some skills. So by the time they grow, by the time they're 12, this is somebody who is skilled. They can be able to put a calculator together. But look at our education system. First of all, it's not in our mother tongue. It's English. So apart from learning a foreigner's language, we are also tasked with learning the science, which we have really. We are being forced to learn the science in English. Do you think the Chinese speak English when they are making that calculator?
They speak Chinese.
So why do we waste time on subjects that don't lead us? I think the best you can do with our language, with our art subjects, is probably write proposals to beg for your money to come back for development partners. That's the least we can do with our English. Why don't we go to our villages? If you go to Kabale and you find somebody is taking care of a forest, or somebody is taking care of a farm, why don't you teach this person how to do something maybe with their potatoes, with the milk, process it? How best can I be able to take this milk to Kampala? You see? But now what is happening is, I will milk my 3 cows and take it to the market. Somebody takes it in a big tank, processes it, puts it in a package. What benefit? After you sell your 1 liter for 4,000, the contract is done. How about you process it? How about you start doing yogurt? So we are not really skilling our young people. We are not making them ready for the new environment in the world where manufacturing needs to happen, where the resources are. I think with that, I'll say
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
I would like to recommend a presenter for that thoughtful and provocative paper that's centered on, I would say, the state of the mining economy in Africa and, of course, the challenges, the prospects, and the way forward. And I'll just have to raise some little issues here and there very quickly. That first, I think it's a matter of historiography that Africans did have a mining economy. And it never began with the Europeans, although I understand clearly what she was trying to articulate. But if you look at all African backgrounds, we did have our mining economy, and of course, we've been able to mine some minerals here and there. Take, for instance, salt, for instance, and of course, you can also iron, of course, that was being translated into other household items, like hose, cutlasses, etc. And of course, we're being able to put together some, weapons of war, based on the mining of oil, and of course, the technology that existed within the environment. And of course, even gold was mined in Africa. If we remember Mansa Musa, for instance, the pilgrimage that he made to Mecca, and of course, the kind of gold that he took into Mecca, and that resulted into the fall of the gold prices across that region at that time. But the fact is that I quite agree with her that Africans never understood the value of the mineral resources they had, and so because of that, we kind of, did not have a proper placement on the kind of mineral resources that we do have. For instance, the Bantus in South Africa had, for a very long time, lived on gold, but referred to gold as a useless yellow metal. As far as Africans were concerned, iron and iron technology was more relevant in terms of the domestication of the environment, in terms of being able to produce their livelihood. And so Africans did not really pay attention to other minerals like gold, like silver, like bronze. But we do know, from the artwork from Africa, from the sculpture, from the carvings, and of course, many, the bronze heads, etc., from African kingdoms like the Hausa states, that of Benin and etc., that Africans had a knowledge of the extraction of mineral resources, and it also had indigenous local technology that could go into the extraction of mineral resources. And of course, not just that alone, but apply that in the process of production, and of course was relevant to the African situation in terms of development. Now, all of that is what was swept under carpet, relegated to the background, European imperialism and colonialism that began with the Berlin Conference of 1886. And I like her take-up point, the treaties that were signed between local African states, kingdoms, and of course, European trading companies. And when I was preparing for this interface, I had to go back into some of these treaties. And of course, many African states at that time never knew the implications of the kind of treaties that were signing with European trading companies. So in several respects, we gave away our sovereignty in terms of the mineral content, even in terms of the economy, in terms of the kind of resources that we agreed that, look, this kind of resources, would be controlled by European powers and their colonizers in Africa. And all of that lies within the framework of international law. And that is why sometimes, honestly speaking, when you're looking at the challenge of the mining economy in Africa, in terms of what is legal and illegal, it becomes difficult to define it, in the sense that, well, from the perspective of European colonizers, the companies that came in, and of course, based on those treaties that they signed with local African states, whatever they're doing in Africa is legal. But from the African perspective, of course, there's no doubt about it that much of the mining activities taking place in Africa today is completely illegal, in the sense that it negates, the sense of economic independence of the African nations. Upon independence, we need to get this clear, that what happened in Africa really was just a transfer of political power from the European colonizers to the ruling African elites. And what happened at the independence was that it was a mutual understanding and that kind of agreement that political power and authority will be transferred to the ruling African elites, but the commanding heights of the African economies, including the mineral resources, were still under the control of European nations and, of course, the trading companies that that existed in Africa. After the Second World War, and of course, right up into independence, multinational corporations began to pour out into Africa. I am happy she, was able to explore a lot of these mineral areas, the oil, gold, and of course, uranium and etc. But wherever they went to, these multinational corporations doing business in Africa, they now entered into new forms of agreement with African leaders. And I think this is something that we really need to understand. I agree with her when she said that look what is happening in Africa, it's a neo-colonial state. So in terms of the structure, in terms of the foundation, these multinationals entered into new forms of agreement with African leaders after independence. And of course, these agreements, if you look at them, it will be important if maybe at another platform we can, x-ray some of these agreements or treaties. But for instance, I will give you one. African nations don't pay debts directly by using money. For anything that European nations will supply to Africans in terms of development, infrastructural development, like for instance, the railways that were built in Africa, the roads, and of course, even electricity generation, mainly, whatever they do for Africans, Africans pay back, through their minerals. And of course, there are agreements here and there that you're paying these debts back over a period of time, and you agree that these minerals will be extracted in such a way that, like she rightly said, you don't know what is the quantity. You don't even know, who determines the value, except they determine the value. And these are become some critical issues that define the mining economy in Africa. So Africa has a challenge that is twofold. One, that is external imperialism. Two, that is internal within the domestic sphere. But how the domestic sphere and the external interfaces in terms of domesticating our experience, technology and science, and making it applicable to development in Africa is what will push Africa forward, especially in this era of these mining challenges that Africa is beginning to have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor. I couldn't have said it better than you. Thank you so much, my senior professor there from Nigeria. Let me have online Valentino Joshua. So let's hear from you. What do you think? Africa, when you read your history there, even when you Google right now, even when you put in a keyword, which is the richest continent in the world in terms of mineral resources, Africa is number one. Just straight right now. Just straight right now. Which is the richest continent in the world in mineral resources? It is Africa. Now they also add you another paragraph, but Africa is the poorest continent. How does that come on, my brother? If I am rich in terms of mineral resources, how can I be poor?
What an irony there. But allow me to, I commend the two professors that have spoken earlier, and my brother, Professor Wuje there, trying to give us some perspective on how illegal mining is taking place in the African continent. But I don't know, allow me to deviate a little, starting this way, but of course I wouldn't go far. In my own case, why Africa remains the poorest country despite having these huge resources, it is what I will call, or I will tag, blaming the victim. And allow me to blame the African continent. And allow me to start this way. Now, let me use Nigeria to contextualize the issue of illegal mining in the African continent. Now, if you take a look at Nigeria, Nigeria, like any other country, has a constitution. every country is governed by constitution, and every country is governed by laws. Now, let's go back to the Nigerian constitution, and let me now tell you how illegal mining is fueling illegal mining. I don't know whether I'm making sense here. Why I say illegal mining is fueling illegal mining, this is what I mean. Now, if you take a look at the Nigerian law, the Constitution of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, it makes it very clear that land belongs to the land is a property of the government. And this was further buttressed in the Land Use Act of 1978, that controlling land is the sole responsibility of government. Now, in doing that, the only way an individual can acquire land is by C of O, that's certificate of occupancy. That's what makes you to occupy a particular land. For instance, in most African countries like Nigeria, we have 3 tiers of government. We have federal, we have state, and we have locals. And in Nigeria, you are saying that, of course, it is only government, federal government, that controls land, but you are issuing C of O's. Now, C of O's remains the only document. No any document supersedes C of O in the control of land. And governors are the one in charge of the C of O's because they are the custodians of the land. Now, what I'm trying to say, let me make it very clear so that we understand where I'm coming from. Now, if you are saying you are issuing C of O's to individuals to acquire land, now, this is where the problem is. First of all, these European powers, they come to Africa, acquire these certificates, occupy these lands, and they will, in the C of O's, there are issues mentioned on what the land should be used for. And you obtain the C of O's, they will tell you that we are using this land to process this particular product. We are using this land to establish this particular company. They will not tell you that they are using this land for mining. And beneath it, they are exploring our resources unabated. And that is where the problem is. For instance, the ECOWAS recently made a shocking revolution that, of course, that Africa, especially Nigeria, let me be specific, that Nigeria loses 91% of revenue from the mining sector. And the ECOWAS parliament went ahead to say that the mining sector can generate a high number of GDPs to some countries. For instance, Ghana, they say mining can generate 7.5% to the country's GDP. For instance, Burkina Faso, the ECOWAS is saying mining in Burkina Faso can generate 10.2% to the country's GDP. For instance, in Ivory Coast, ECOWAS are saying that, of course, mining sector alone can generate 5%. But the irony of it is that how are we harnessing all these potentials to make Africa a great country? Because the European powers, like Professor said, of course, we've gotten independence for many years ago. But we're really independent. We could be independent in principles, but in practical terms, we're not independent. In view of the fact that, of course, like Professor Mulumba will always tell us, that we are colonized mentally. And that is where the problem is. And if we are colonized mentally, it therefore means that there is a problem that we need to face as an African continent. For instance, in Nigeria, taking a look at all that has happened, I listened to the 2 speakers earlier, and they were saying that, of course, we don't know what we have on ground. I quite appreciate that. But for instance, a recent research conducted in Nigeria has geostatistic data. I said that Nigeria has 44 mineral resources of different nature spread across the African country. And research have also shown that this resources, if it's going to be harnessed, that it's worth about $750 billion US. What a huge amount of money. But surprisingly, federal government of Nigeria is saying out of these resources that the country is losing $9 billion annually as a result of illegal mining. And one surprising thing is this. These persons come to this continent, they explore these resources, and nobody cares to say anything because our laws are not people-driven laws. Some of our laws, they are colonial laws, they are military laws, and you don't expect them to yield any result in a democratic setting. For instance, when you talk about illegal mining in Nigeria, what comes to mind easily, let me take you to Zamfara. Zamfara is one of the states in Nigeria that illegal mining is taking place at the high side and affecting other African countries. For instance, the illegal mining, the exploitation of gold in Zamfara, it's being taken illegally through Niger down to Togo, and nobody said anything. For instance, in 2020, a high number of illegal miners were arrested. A chunk of them are Chinese. And last year, 32 illegal miners were also arrested. And some of them are Chinese. And just in Kwara, a neighboring state to where I am, the country's, what do you call it, EFCC, our Financial Crime Commission arrested 13 Chinese nationals for illegal mining. Just this year, in my own state, Nasarawa, 4 Chinese persons were arrested for illegal mining. And in Oyo, recently, 8 Chinese persons, in Abia, 8 Chinese persons were arrested for illegal mining. But the question is,
you're just a minute. You're just arresting them now or yesterday. They have been in Nigeria exploiting for how many years? You're just waking up right now? You arrested them yesterday.
Yes, that is why I said earlier that I'm trying to see, in my analysis, I'm really blaming the victim, that our laws are not punitive enough. For instance, in all these arrests, I want to tell you, the arrests were made. But the shocking thing is this, that we are not told how are they being prosecuted. All of these arrests, from my knowledge, only 2 Chinese persons were prosecuted by the court. And guess what was the penalty? They were sentenced to 1 year imprisonment with option of fine. And so you are saying they can pay and go free. So what happens after? Will you go to will you go to China and go and perpetuate this inhumanity act and expect that the law will not catch up with you? So that is the situation we find ourselves.
My senior, in Uganda, Chinese are even mining sand from the lake. Yeah, it is happening.
That's quite unfortunate.
They are actually exporting. They're exporting sand.
And let me say this. And that explains why we must find a way of strengthening our laws. That is what the problem is. Our laws are not punitive enough. For instance, in 2022, that is 2 years back, the Nigeria Immigration Service in one of the northern states in Nigeria, that's Niger State, about 200 Chinese persons were arrested for staying in Nigeria illegally. They stayed, nobody checkmate what they are doing. So the question, who is bringing them? What are they doing? When they are signing visas, what are they saying they are coming to Africa to do? Nobody is questioning that. And because our leaders only take euphoria in what they will come and get. For instance, let me tell you, probably if you go through my profile, you discover that I repost the State House of Assembly, that is state parliamentarians in the northern parts of the country, Nasarawa State precisely. Now, in Nasarawa State, you and I know very well that one of the market that is booming now is the lithium market. because lithium is becoming a lucrative business, not just in Africa, but the entire world. And Nasarawa State, the place I am presently, has a chunk of these resources. And this is what most of the Chinese companies are doing. Because we have lacunas in our laws, let me tell you what they are doing. They will come because the law says you must obtain mining consent from the locals before you now go to Abuja to obtain the mining license. Now they come, they bribe these locals, they give them some money, and the locals who are very poor, they would allow themselves to be cheated, allow me to use that word, and they will collect this bribe, and they will give the mining consent to these companies. The companies will now go to Abuja. In Abuja, they will now receive the mining license. They return back to the locality, begin to mine these resources. And because of the lacuna in the law, the state government does not have much power to control them. Because the law in my country says mining resources is the responsibility of the federal government, not the state government at all. And so if the state government cannot control what it has, it is the federal government that will control. That is what is happening in other African countries. Then it becomes a situation where the masses will be exploited. And that's what exactly is happening. For instance, in my state, it is now that the House of Assembly is thinking of a way to regulate the issuance of mining consent by the locals, because it's becoming an issue. Because you discovered that, for instance, I reported few months ago in one of the localities, 2 Chinese companies are claiming ownership of a particular land that, of course, they've received mining consent from the locals, because all of them are having the mining consent. And they've gone to Abuja, they've received the mining license. And so if they are having this license, so whose fault now? It is our fault, the African people. It is our fault of our leader that we don't have the political will to put the laws in place and strengthen them, make them punitive enough. For instance, you can't go to Chinese and loot their treasury, and somebody, you expect that the government will just sentence you for 1 year, only 1 year. It's not possible. It's only obtainable in Africa. And that is why we will remain the poorest country in the continent amidst all the abundant mineral resources we have. So we must have to start thinking outside the box. Now, in my own state, Nasarawa State, it is now that the state government is thinking of regulating the activities of locals in issuing this mining consent. But I told you earlier, I don't know of other African countries, but it's still peculiar that CFO, certificate of occupancy, supersede any document for possession of land. So what some of these companies do, my brother, is that they come to Africa, they will tell you that, of course, they would want to occupy or buy a certain portion of land. And they go ahead and the government release those land to them through their godfathers. Sometimes they find their way. And since they have the possession of the land with this particular document, they can decide to do whatever is beneath it, because we don't even have structures to checkmate them. That is why the problem is, my brother. Of course, we are the richest in terms of resources, but we'll continue to be the poorest, the poorest country, because we refuse to put people's driven laws on ground. I'm sorry to say, our politicians in the African continent, like Professor Molumba will say, they are always after their pockets and their families. And this is where the problem lies. We must, as a people, Professor Wilfred, probably he was trying not to be found liable of treason. Probably that's why he was saying he's not calling for revolution. But my brother, I'm saying it, the only way that African country will come back and take its glory from the colonial masters is through revolution. Revolution of a different kind. I'm not advocating for a violent revolution, but a revolution that will bring Africa back to our roots and take charge, so that we will not be colonized by these powers and make our people cry on a daily basis. And what is happening? Until we change our laws. So allow me to say, I am blaming the victim. I am blaming the African continent. For instance, when the ECOWAS sat and said, of course, that 80% of mineral resources being exploited in the northern part of Nigeria are done illegally. The question that needs answer now, what are the mechanisms put in place to ensure that they are not exploited illegally? And the issue there, even those you term legal exploration of mineral resources, are they in conformity with the yearnings and aspirations of our people as Africans? They are not. For instance, in South Africa, I told you earlier, South Africa alone annually is losing $376 million as a result of illegal mining. And for us in Nigeria, the federal government said we are losing 9 billion naira annually to illegal mining. And so it therefore means that we are only sitting on goals and someone is tapping them at the detriment of our children and those yet unborn, which is quite unfortunate. We must put our thinking caps and make sure that we start thinking rightly.
Thank you so much, my brother. Thank you so much for your insightful submission.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for this important debate. And more specifically, if we are looking at Africa and the mining sector. Mr. Chair, Africa will remain silent as for long if it does not come up to exercise full potential and capacity to exploit its resources, add value to mineral resources and the raw materials through developed technologies and industrial development. Now, what if you can ask a question? What was Africa at the time of colonization?
How were they?
What was Africa at the time of colonization in terms of technological development, in terms of industrial revolution, in terms of education, in terms of cultural aspects? Because that is where we are going to base on whether we should still remain silent or make noise, like someone said somewhere, that make noise. Now, if we are still using a hoe
to dig,
we are still engaging in subsistence agriculture. We are still...
I saw somebody using a bottle to irrigate plants.
Irrigation.
You remember that friend of ours?
Exactly. We are still having topics on our syllabus, like why did they say transfer his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar? Then we have a reason to remain silent. We have a reason to remain, because what will a topic like Zanzibar and Said's transfer of his capital add value to our resources in terms of mineral exploitation? What will it do? It has nothing to do. So that means that we shall continue to remain silent if we do not show capacity that we can be able to exploit our resources. We have the capacity to exploit our resources. We are seeing Democratic Republic of Congo, which has a very rich, diverse mineral resources and other resources. There are certain parts which are still a virgin in terms of forest resources in Congo. Now, what have Congolese done in order to utilize those resources? You remember a certain explorer, in the names of Henry Stallone, duped Africa as a darker continent. Why was it called a darker continent? Because we are not known outside the world. We had our cultures here. We had our resources here, but they were not known. We were not known until the time when the scramble for Africa by the Europeans came on course. And during the time of the growth of the economy of Europeans, definitely started creating market for the potential investments in Europe to get raw materials from here. And that's why the scramble for Africa took shape, because they were scrambling. Africa was looked as having resources which are still virgin, not utilized. Although, that's why I would answer your question where you asked that, why is it that we are a rich continent, but we are considered as poor? We are rich in resources, but technologically or in terms of knowledge, we cannot use our knowledge to exercise the potential to do investment in these resources. It's like someone having huge chunks of land, but he's a poor man. He cannot even afford a matchbox. But he has land. So how do you utilize that land in order to get to get resources that can develop or create investment opportunities? And that's where we are having a problem. The colonial incorporation of Africa into global economy saw it primarily as a source of raw materials. This immediately shaped the continent into a series of enclave economics structured around the control of land and mineral resources to supply colonial centers. As I've said, there was a scramble for African countries. And you remember the first African countries to be colonized were in North Africa. Countries like Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritius. And by the way, Mauritius is the richest country in Africa. In terms of GDP, it's the richest country in Africa. So many raw materials like rubber, timber, minerals like gold, coal, copper were taken from Africa during colonization. Now, the Industrial Revolution created a global demand for African exports, including minerals, that were required in extensive mining operation to extract, for extraction. Now, the exploration of minerals facilitated the construction of railways. As you know, induced large inflows of European investment and forced profound changes in the operation of labor and land. Now, when you look at Africa, you cannot develop, you cannot exercise, have capacity to develop resources that are amidst you if you don't have capacity to develop infrastructure that are necessary for exploitation. You will need electricity to do mining processes. You will need transport, the good road network. You will need railway to transport. For transport, you will need skills, the expertise, which is largely lacking in Africa. And that's why, even today, that our roads in Uganda, you have to seek the services of an expertise from China to construct our roads. Why can't we have companies ourselves here to construct roads? In case if they are there, what kind of work are they doing? A bridge which is constructed 5 years back is breaking down. But a hall, a university hall like Lumumba in Makerere, which was constructed many years back by the expertise from outside the country, is still standing. Why? So the issue is not simply having resources, but the capacity to exploit those resources.
To utilize the resources.
To utilize the resources. Do you have the capacity? we know that those ones, the whites, have developed high affinity in terms of discovery than us. And that's why they are the ones coming to tell us that there is oil here, there is coal here, there is iron ore in Kabale, there is the gold in Karamoja. There is
uranium.
There's uranium, but we have a full government. We have a full government
in power.
With all, no, of course they will be in power, but there are even other governments.
In the power without power.
No, without the issues of discovery. Because we have a full government, but with the institutions, the ministries, and the departments,
and agencies,
which are much more capable of making discovery. We have a geological surveys in the midst of lands. Those are the ones. Now, what is their role? You are waiting for an American to come and tell you that there's coal here. So that's where we have issues. The capacity, yes, we may be rich in mineral resources, but how are we utilizing our potential to see that these minerals are exploited and utilized effectively?
Thank you.
That's where we have issues.
Thank you.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I am very thrilled by the topic discussed today. And it's one that's touching. Given the education system in Uganda, every time we are told that we are being taught to be job seekers, right? Other than create our own. And I am not going to only blame this on the students or the education system, but even our governments have failed us. They themselves have failed to be able to put the skills at work. We are having a number of students today who are learning petroleum engineering. I'll tell you that years back when they discovered that there was oil in Hoima, almost every student who was applying wanted to do petroleum engineering. Close friends of mine, I have about friends who are doing that very course. And I imagine they are going to get done with studying. Where are the jobs? Because some of them are done, almost graduating, but they've even maybe never been to the field for even internship. I would like to highlight with one thing that really amazes me in this country. We were talking about our governments giving the colonialists privilege to still exploit us. I would like us to look at the East African crude oil pipeline. I imagine no man is an island, and we believe Uganda doesn't have the capacity to exploit these minerals. But in my own land, I am never going to bring employees and then expect them to take more than I, the owner. Why don't we have people to bargain well for us? If we have failed to raise people with the skills and employ our youth, why don't these people bargain well? Total Energies has about 62%, and imagine Uganda, the owner of the oil, has 15%. Who sat in that committee of bargaining? We need answers. How many of our youth who are educated, our engineers, who are getting these jobs, are they even putting their skills at work, or they are just doing not even the managerial job? I would imagine someone who maybe has a very good degree in petroleum engineering, doing the basics in these mineral fields, right? So we want to know, who are the people bargaining for us? Yes, you want
to know by faces.
I want them to come and answer us. How can you bargain for 15%? Really, that's mediocre. I imagine, do they even love Africa? The people in leadership, by the time they want to leave leadership, they actually, someone said they are settling for breadcrumbs because maybe these breadcrumbs can sustain their families, right? But we are discussing in 10, 15 years, where is Uganda going to be? Okay. I was looking at some of the minerals, and when I was trying to search, it's like Uganda has over 50 different types of minerals. And some of them have not yet even been discovered. You know, some of them have not yet been exploited. You are telling me we have Chinese in Uganda who are exploiting our sand. Leave that for the locals. Leave that for the locals. You get, these people are coming here, they are given tax holidays. When those tax holidays are done, these people run away. We even look at the tax policies. Don't we have the people who can invest in these projects? We have people like Hamis Chigundu. We have the Sudirs who have been investing in Uganda. Can't these people invest? Oh, I would say, don't we trust the education system? Don't we trust the young people we are educating? Because I don't think these young people are going to be given jobs outside Uganda or outside Africa, right? Even when they come to Africa to get geniuses and educate them outside, they want them to still remain and work for the white man. They are never allowed to come back to Uganda or even Africa. They are always there in the laboratories and thinking. Most of the movies that I've watched, I always see like it's the blacks with the knowledge. Unless it's like, you know, the imagery is wrong. But then, me, what I'm trying to say, we may not have the capacity to exploit these minerals, but we are requesting our governments, when you are bargaining, bargain for the people, bargain for our future. These people are not in power to stay. Some of us are going to be leaders tomorrow. We don't even know what is in these contracts. Where are we going to start from? Or do they expect us to start from scratch, liberating this nation? Just like someone said, the revolution starts now. Our leaders only come out here to cry about neocolonialism when the white man refuses to give them the money they need to be corrupt about. But they are very happy to settle for breadcrumbs. What is 15%? What is really 15% for a country like Uganda? We don't even know the capacity of the oil we have. What is 15%? And total, a foreign country is having about 60%. Our leaders have failed us. And if they ever listen to this, we want accountability. We want transparency. If they can't let them go back and drip again, actually Uganda should be owning at least 50% or 60%. 80%. These people are just workers. You're giving them the jobs. But our leaders have failed us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Let me first ask Comrade Dipundagire Frederick.
Yes, thanks for that opportunity. Let me take this opportunity first to thank the organizers of this insightful conversation.
Thank you.
I'm Diplomat Ndagire K. Frederick, the chairman of Young Pan-African Association, and currently based in Kampala, Uganda. So have traveled to most of the countries in East Africa. I'm so glad that I have also been invited on this conversation, and also I'm glad that I want to share my idea when it comes to mining and looting of resources in Africa. Really, when you look at the globe and the world at large, that 80% of the resources being used in European industries are from Africa. When we go to the year in 1780s, most of by that time the workshop of the world was UK, and by that time most of the resources that were being used in UK were from Canada and USA by that time. And by that time, most of the resources were being exploited from USA and Canada by UK. So by the time Canada, France, and America got into the industrialization program, by that time they had to seek for resources from Africa. And how are they seeking resources? If we want to understand this, the question is, how are they getting resources and why are we poor? One, the resources they are getting in a way of maintaining us poor. When you go to the words of President of United States of America, President Reagan, he said that the only way to maintain our riches is to make sure that Africa remains poor.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Thank you very much, Professor from Nigeria, Professor Oji from Nigeria. It's been a great pleasure me having you here via our Zoom link. Thank you so much, Comrade Valentin Joshua, a fellow journalist, a comrade journalist from Nigeria. I'm so grateful for having gotten an opportunity to speak to you. And this was possible because of our another comrade, Comrade Retso Mena Koji, who is also a journalist in Nigeria. She has been my co-host on this show. Thank you so much, DP Ndagire Frederick and Madam Joan Nkuse. Thank you so much. My physical audience here, Comrade Edith Ouma. Thank you so much. And Comrade Eric Sakwa, my elder senior here from the President's Office, formerly working with the President's Office as an RDC in charge of Jinja District. I thank you so much. Sign out. My name is Andrew Irumba Katsabe. Watch this show on Saturdays from 4 to 5 p.m. on NBS television.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.